Someone says to you, "You're absolutely brilliant. Everything you do is just perfect. I don't know how you manage it." And instead of feeling good, you feel something else entirely, a kind of internal recoil, a low-level discomfort that you might not even be able to name right away, but that's clearly there. Not false modesty, not insecurity, just a genuine, almost involuntary resistance to what was just said. Most people watching from the outside will misread that reaction entirely. They'll think, this person doesn't know how to take a compliment. They're too hard on themselves. They need to learn to accept appreciation. But those readings are wrong. They're projecting a simpler psychology onto something that's actually considerably more precise. Today we're going to look at what's actually happening inside people who don't respond well to flattery, because the psychology of it reveals something important about how they process the world. Let's start with the most fundamental piece. The assumption most people carry is that everyone, at some level, wants to be flattered. That the person who reacts badly to it is somehow deficient, missing the normal human appetite for praise. But this gets the direction of causality exactly backwards. People who don't like flattery are not deficient in their response to praise. They are more precise in it. They make a distinction that many people collapse. The distinction between a genuine compliment and flattery. And once you understand that distinction clearly, their reaction makes complete sense. A genuine compliment is specific. It's grounded in something real, a particular thing the person actually did, a quality that genuinely showed up, an effort that was genuinely noticed. It has a referent in reality. You can point to it. Flattery is different. It's diffuse, excessive, and largely disconnected from anything specific the person has actually done. It's the verbal equivalent of a generic greeting card, something pleasant-sounding that could have been said to almost anyone about almost anything. Psychologists who study social cognition have found that people vary significantly in how deeply they process the signals embedded in social interaction. For most people, a kind word registers as a kind word, and the evaluation stops there. For people with a higher sensitivity to authenticity, the processing goes further. They're not just hearing what's being said. They're assessing whether it maps onto something real. And when it doesn't, when the praise is too broad, too absolute, too untethered from actual evidence, something in them flags it. Not consciously, necessarily. Just a quiet internal signal that what they're receiving doesn't quite fit. That signal is dissonance. And dissonance is uncomfortable regardless of how cheerfully the words that caused it were delivered. Now let's talk about the second piece, which is, in many ways, the foundation of the first. These people already have a clear picture of who they are. Psychologists use the term internal self-concept to describe the sense of identity and self-worth that comes from within rather than from external feedback. People with a strong internal self-concept have done a significant amount of self-examination. They know their actual strengths, not an idealized version, but the real ones, the ones they can back up. They also know their genuine weaknesses, the things they haven't mastered, the gaps between where they are and where they'd like to be. That internal picture is honest. It was built through actual experience, through trying things, failing at some, succeeding at others, and paying attention to the difference. It wasn't assembled from what other people said about them. It was assembled from what they observed about themselves over time. And because it's honest, it becomes a calibration tool. When something comes in from outside, a piece of feedback, an assessment, a compliment, they're measuring it against that internal picture automatically. Flattery almost never survives that measurement. It's almost always too generous, too absolute, too disconnected from the nuanced and accurate self-image these people carry. When someone says, "You're absolutely perfect at this," the person who knows themselves well hears the mismatch immediately. They know where their performance actually landed. They know what went well and what didn't. The flattery doesn't describe them. It describes a simplified, inflated version of them that they don't recognize. Self-determination theory, developed by Deci and Ryan, identifies autonomy and internal validation as core components of genuine well-being. People who operate primarily from an internal reference point don't need external affirmation to feel capable or worthwhile. They've built that sense from the inside. Which means flattery isn't filling a need they have. It's offering them something they've already provided for themselves in a less accurate form. This isn't arrogance. Arrogance is an inflated self-image. What we're describing is almost the opposite, a carefully calibrated one. People who are arrogant tend to love flattery because it confirms the inflated picture they already have of themselves. People who are genuinely self-aware resist flattery because it doesn't match the accurate picture they've built through honest self-examination. The third piece of this goes deeper still, and it's the one that most directly shapes how these people experience flattery in the moment. They're not just hearing the words. They're asking why. Human beings have a natural capacity for detecting what psychologists call ulterior motives. The recognition that what someone is saying on the surface may be in service of something else operating underneath. Most people exercise this capacity selectively and imperfectly. People who don't like flattery tend to exercise it consistently and accurately. This isn't paranoia. It's pattern recognition developed through experience. And for people who have lived long enough and paid close enough attention, the patterns are fairly clear. Flattery is one of the oldest and most reliable tools of social influence. It precedes requests. It smooths the way for asks. It's used to lower defenses, create goodwill, and manufacture a sense of obligation. In short, it's often instrumental, a means to an end rather than a genuine expression of admiration. Research on ingratiation psychology, which studies how people use flattery and other tactics to influence others, confirms what these people have already figured out from lived experience. Excessive praise is frequently a precursor to something else. Not always, but often enough that the association is real and the pattern is worth noticing. When someone who has internalized this pattern receives heavy flattery, their mind doesn't rest in the warm feeling it was designed to produce. It moves past that immediately to a different question. Why is this person saying this? What does this precede? What's coming next? That question isn't cynical. It's calibrated, and it comes from a place of clarity rather than suspicion. These people don't assume the worst about everyone who compliments them. They simply don't turn off their judgment just because someone is being pleasant. The warmth of a delivery doesn't override the content of the message, and if the content doesn't hold up, the warmth doesn't compensate for it. It's the response of someone who has learned that praise that arrives too easily and costs nothing usually isn't free. So let's be clear about who these people actually are. They're not difficult. They're not cold. They're not people who secretly want to be flattered and are just performing resistance to seem humble. They are people who hear the difference between genuine appreciation and empty inflation, who know themselves well enough that inaccurate praise creates friction rather than comfort, and who have enough experience to recognize flattery as a social tool before they receive it as a gift. There is also something worth noting about what these people actually respond to instead. They respond well to specificity, to feedback that names exactly what worked and why, to criticism that is honest and useful rather than softened into meaninglessness, to interactions where the person across from them is clearly engaging with who they actually are, rather than a performed version designed to make them feel good. These exchanges are rarer than flattery. They require more effort and more attention. But for these people, one honest observation lands more meaningfully than a dozen generous exaggerations. In a world that uses flattery as conversational lubricant, as the easy, frictionless way to make an interaction feel warm, these people are asking for something more. Not more praise, more accuracy. The people who don't want to be flattered aren't hard to please. They just want the real thing. If that landed for you, leave a comment. I'd like to hear your thoughts. I'll see you in the next video.